Hi, Professor. First thing, apologize for my location. I am currently in a hotel in Minneapolis, currently at the Summit League Softball Conference Tournament. Game 1 for us today is at 1 p.m., so go Yotes. I can't believe that it's already the finals and filming final exam videos with you. It's kind of crazy. This year as a graduate assistant and graduate student has gone by really fast for me. I'll miss Vermillion a little bit for sure. When it comes to this class, the biggest thing that I've personally taken away from this semester is that the sports industry is constantly shifting, and it's currently in this process of shifting from being personal entertainment based. It's becoming way more focused on online engagement, in-person engagement, and data-driven content at every level. When it comes to connecting all of those things together that we've talked about, and the readings and videos and lectures that we've gone over for all 16 modules that we've had, real world things like sports gambling, sports media, and sports fans are the three topics that I'm going to go over and kind of talk about. The fan is no longer just the ones that are going to the in-person games. The fan has become and now is an entire part of a system that is constantly being changed, tracked, and influenced across so many different platforms. Whether that is through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, different streaming platforms like Sling, NFL Network, ESPN, and so many more. Modern sports just continues to become its own ecosystem, a continuously changing platform where gambling, sports media, sports fans all depend on one another and work together for revenue and viewership, more money. First topic, sports gambling, starting things off. This is probably the easiest example of that shift in real time. Whether it's the professional or collegiate realm of sports, gambling has continued to grow and change. Whether that's good or bad, I think that depends on who you ask. In the week we talked about sports gambling, I found and reread some articles we used outside of our lectures and videos. In the ESPN article that we read, we went over how the sports industry and the betting industry is experiencing a lot of changes while it grows. The idea of that article was basically, as gambling continues to grow so fast, it's starting to experience some issues with structure and sustainability, and some people are worried about long term. When something is growing that fast, especially on an online platform where, in my opinion, I don't think you have full control. I think it's hard sometimes to be able to prepare and maintain that growth consistently. Since sports gambling legalization expanded in 2018 Supreme Court, that's when the 2018 Supreme Court decision was passed, sports gambling has intertwined itself in sports in so many levels. Moving from betting was something used to be external for sports has now become something that is inside the sports leagues. Gambling shows up literally everywhere. Sponsorships, commercials, apps, stadium branding, broadcasting, they all include sports betting, sports data, all of that. During my time as an athlete at the University of Iowa, some of the baseball players got into some big trouble with sports gambling and betting. There was loss of years of eligibility, guys cut from the team, and some guys even had their draft, MLB draft prospects affected because of it. It becomes a much different and bigger problem for universities and professional sports leagues as well. They're fighting to keep and maintain growth. I personally have never really gambled besides scratch tickets, and this year I played a $5 fantasy football league where I was learning as the weeks went on. Sports gambling is a monster within itself, something that I still don't fully understand. And I'm happy that I got to learn more about the topic through the lectures, readings, and the videos from our week's module. The CNN video was another part of that week's module. It gave me a lot of information on online sports gambling and addiction when it comes to gambling. Another added layer to all of that thought. The video discussed how online and mobile betting has made gambling instant and most of the time issue-free. It just has increased the availability of sports gambling for many, and it also raises concerns about potential addictive behavior with it. Having family members who have experienced sports gambling and played collegiate and professional sports, what stood out to me is that gambling is no longer just a growth industry. It's now become an actual management problem for sports leagues and organizations. And I think it's something that they didn't have to account for in the past years, and now they do. From a sports management viewpoint, there's a clear conflict with sports gambling. It increases revenue and engagement, but it also increases risk for both the consumer and the league or the team themselves. Sports gambling isn't just growing. I think it's reshaping how sports leagues, fans, and all people involved in sports have to regulate it. The second topic from class I chose was the ever-changing model of sports media. In one of the YouTube videos from a week's module, the main topic was that sports media has moved away from traditional broadcasting and towards digital, interactive, multi-platform systems, trying to keep up with more fast, quick, and highlighted focused videos. And interaction is what the Gen Z population and most people online these days push for. It's what they want to see in their feed. Sports teams have just had to adjust to that demand. It's no longer about just showing and broadcasting games, but keeping fans engaged across all platforms. Another YouTube video from this week emphasized how sports coverage is now so data-driven. Instead of narrating what's only happening in the game or the player and teams for that season, their stats, how they've been doing, injuries, whatever, it's become win probabilities, player tracking information, real-time data analytics on the sides of your screen, just always. Sports media is no longer just storytelling. It's now an entire system built around interaction, data, and retention, and gaining more fans, teams, and sports gamblers. The data-driven information is even more fuel when it comes to sports betting and gambling in every single way. Real-time data and information are embedded into broadcasts, and it's now easier today to gather betting-related content when watching games than it used to be. When connecting sports gambling and sports media, it's a giant feedback loop that just continues to get bigger and grow and grow and grow. With more sports media broadcasts, sponsorships, data, gamblers increase engagement with that media because they want more information and they're financially invested in those games now. It's kind of insane to me when you really think about it. As an athlete, I never really understood the scale of sports betting and what it has become. Sports media and sports betting reinforce each other all the time. This class has brought a lot of new information to the sports world in that perspective for me. But like myself, not all fans watching these new technologies and platform promotions with the idea of gambling in mind. Some people want to experience watching sports the way that they want to, but I do think that the experience for every fan has changed in recent years. Even commentators and the sides of the screen filled with odds, probabilities, and interpretation of what's happening in the game isn't for everybody, and I think some people just have to live with that. Sports consumption has changed on so many levels. I do think, though, that going from purely entertainment-based, going to games, promoting those games, videos from those games, highlights from those games, I think the multi-platform, data-driven entertainment has brought more people in. And I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, but I do think it's something that we don't have a hold on, even if we say we do. With sports gambling and sports media, the third topic that we talked about through the entire class was the commercialization of sports fans and how being a sports fan today is so different than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's not just about loyalty of a team and team support anymore. It's about being a part of a system. where it's money driven. Fans are engaged through streaming subscriptions, fantasy sports apps, betting platforms, merchandise apps, content on social media, is all of that. Commercializing fans is something that is constantly happening and changing. And for me, I even think from the time that I first started watching sports till now, it's become so different just because of how much information is given now. And being a coach, I think that I look at like the outside of the actual game, like what's going on with the coaching staff, what's happening on the sidelines, what's that kind of stuff. I just think everything has become, number one, videoed, and number two, it's changing. Every dynamic is changing. Commercializing fans is something that's constantly happening. But it's money driven. It connects right back to sports gambling and sports media. Gambling turns fans into financial participation, cards even in some ways. Sports media turns fans into continuous engagement revenues. Together, they create a system where fan attention is most important product being sold. Fan engagement has become the core of sports industry model when it comes to business and revenue. When I look at all three of these topics as one, I think the biggest implication and impact that we've learned in class, and not only from our videos and lectures, is that the sport world is becoming fully integrated, with entertainment, revenue, data all being a huge part of it, and more than just the game itself. To bring in more fans, all kinds of new media is having to be pushed out. I think it's both exciting and scary. I kind of wonder where the sports world will go with this technology. We saw with the videos and articles in the week's modules that the gambling industry is already facing questions about sustainability and long-term of that system. I think the pressure of that is going to just increase as gambling continues to become more and more shown through sports media and social media and other social outlets. Another implication of sports world changing is the behavior change that comes. The CNN video that we watched highlighted addiction risks being brought into light. This video talked about how leagues and media companies are having to be way more mindful of how they are actually shaping fan behavior. I also think knowing the power these sports media and gambling platforms actually do hold for their fans is important and not talked about enough. And I think it's really crucial for stability and sustainability with all kinds of sports platforms. The ever-changing fan identity is another implication. Finding ways to reach millennials and Gen Z fans is not only a challenge, but it's because they crave different things from their sports experience, and that's okay. But now I think you have to cater to both a lot more broadly. Fans today are no longer just observers. They are pieces of a system, and they are constantly needing attention. They're constantly trying to pull it for their fans' attention. I think with this change, I think it shifts the meaning of sports fans. It's less community-based identity, and it's a lot more consumption-based sums, which in some ways is really sad. Sports are now only continuing to move away from being a competitive and entertainment space. They are now moving towards being a system of sports media, data, and financial interaction. Throughout this semester, I think I learned a lot about the ins and outs of aspects of sports that I personally wasn't super familiar with, nor had I educated myself on. Sports gambling, sports media, and the changing model for sports fans were all part of the same shift and the same change in sports currently. I think these all affect and reinforce each other. In the sports world, the changes in sports have been so easy to see for the past 10 to 20 years. I think the biggest change in sports is that no longer sports are something that you just watch. It's something that you interact with, engage with, and in some cases, invest and financially participate in.